It's absolutely exploding, and what a great time to have bought it. It's going really well in the fact that every single piece of equipment is busy.
Welcome, and thanks for listening to the very first episode of Project Cargo Professionals, the new podcast that takes you inside the heavy lift business, produced in partnership with Varamar. Our first guest is Kevin O'Sullivan, a Brit now based in the UAE, where we recently met, who had a late start in the world of project cargo. After spending many years in the British Army, he found his feet in logistics and went on to buy part of Mammoet. Here's how he did it. Is it Kevin or Mr. O'Sullivan?
To be honest, I prefer the latter. Bit more formal, if you don't mind.
I didn't expect you to say that.
No, but Kev is all right. No, of course, Kev, absolutely. Never been that kind of guy at all. Informal, I think, is the best way to go. Yeah, Kev it is.
Well, I'm British, so I try to be polite. Obviously, we're going to get onto what's going on in South Africa. But before we get there, tell us a bit about your background, where you come from, and what you were doing before you got into logistics.
Gosh. Well, only really been in logistics just a few years compared to the long career to date. Young 17-year-old whippersnapper living in a very small town near York. Catholic school, nuns, very small community, very small number of friends, I suppose, in a very small school of about 300 kids. I don't know, I just really didn't fit in that well, to be honest, and knew very early in life that I wasn't supposed to be there forever. And I think maybe rebelled against it and, really didn't like it. And I think Dad recognised that and threw me in the back of the car one day and took me down to Hull, which is like a 30-minute drive to the careers centre, and said, "You're joining the army, son. You're not living here anymore." And kicked out the house, really. Yeah. Well, I think that's what you'd call it. Although maybe at the time I didn't realise that. And
now you look back, you can see it.
That was the last time I lived in my parents' home, actually, at 17 years old. And I was just 17. I mean, I'd finished school, but then went off to college in a little town called Selby, which was down the road. And a lot of the kids that were leaving school would go off to this college and then go off to university after that. So I'd taken chemistry and art and something else, which I don't know what I was thinking, really. Wasn't thinking at all, probably. A bit subdued as a young teenager. Didn't really know what I wanted, but as soon as I got to that careers office, the army careers office, and said I wanted to be an architect, and you got this little snigger going, "Oh, we don't really have architects in the military, boy, but yeah, you can be a design draftsman." So roll on a couple of months later, I'm now boarding a train in Yorkshire up to Glencoe in Scotland, again, as a young 17-year-old boy, never really been any more than an hour out of, the town. I'm now travelling 4 hours up north to Scotland to be met by proper soldiers on some selection process in the middle of January or whatever it was, freezing nuts off, and spent, I think, 3 days up at selection with, the dregs of society. Genuinely, it was quite daunting.
You self-excluded?
No, I was part of those dregs of society. I make no bones about it, mate. I was a nobody with no real understanding or aspirations of what was going on. I managed to pass these tests in, 6 months, not even. I think it was in the March. I'm now down at the recruiting office, the Army Training Centre to do basic training. So I'm now a soldier. And from basic training, they send you across to the Royal Engineers training. So there's another sort of phase 2 of not shipbuilding, but raft building and demolitions and mine clearance. And, I think I said the other day we were on power tools and learning how to wire plugs. And it was just like basic engineering, but with a military spin on it. So yeah, again, fast forward a few years, I'm now living in Germany, I'm now a Lance Corporal, I've got sort of Bosnia under my belt. Now I'm thinking about my career a little bit more, fruitfully, and decide that this design draftsman is the way to go. Did a couple of courses at the Royal School of Military Engineering in Chatham. Spent quite a number of years of my life in that base in the end.
Just up the road from my house?
Yeah, and yeah, I was sort of a young kid, getting the train into London at the weekends and living the life. And I think I got my head screwed on a little bit more then and realised that actually the military offered a great deal of structure. It offered a great deal of opportunity. And if you showed will and you put in the effort, you would be recognised for that. And even as a young sort of 19, 20, 21-year-old, I think I realised that actually I quite liked it. Quite liked the camaraderie. I liked the discipline. It kind of fitted with my father's rule, I think. He was quite a disciplined guy, very regimented in the way that he did things, and he passed that to me. And it was a rough time for the first year or two, I think. There was a lot of bullying back in the 90s with the military. It was quite a testing time, I think, on a young man's emotions. But actually, yeah, I learned a lot from it and decided to, take it by both horns, actually. I was one of the youngest corporals that got promoted very quickly through the ranks, and then there was this accelerated program in the military called the Clerk of Works. Most soldiers would say you're not a real soldier if you're Clerk of Works. It was more of the technical stream, the couch potatoes, I'd like to call it. And a lot of these old Clerk of Works that you'd see kicking around would have big bellies and they'd be medically unfit and they couldn't travel and they wouldn't go on operational tour. But I don't know, I think the times had changed by the time I did it. Everybody on my course, when I say it was an accelerated course, basically in 19 months you went from what's called a corporal to a staff sergeant. So you kind of skip 2 ranks almost. And at the end of the 19 months, you're now a staff sergeant, you're in the sergeant's mess. And you've got quite a lot of responsibility financially on your shoulders. And technically, you're supposed to know what you're talking about, So it was a building technology. It was we got a HND in construction management or whatever from this course. It was civilian recognised. But now you're in what's called a specialist team, we're all engineers, and you go on specialist projects in inverted commas around the world, Afghanistan, Iraq and Poland, Cyprus, Canada, in the States. And then, as the Middle East starts kicking off, there's guys off to Somalia and Sudan and various other places around that region. So I had come to this region as a soldier, popping in and out over various years, and probably did 4 or 5 years of operational tours, I think, in the time. So I talk about the military because it was quite a big part of my life. In fact, it was everything to me from the age of 17 to the age of 36. It was 19 years, and leaving the military was a very difficult decision for me, but a decision I made all the same at great risk and at great sort of, I don't know what you call it. I wouldn't say it was disgust, but my family certainly thought I'd made a terrible mistake, The career that I'd had up to that point. Now I'm a warrant officer. I'm a Class 2 warrant officer, looking at promotion to warrant officer Class 1, and beyond that was a commissioned officer, captain, and the rest of it. And a lot of the guys that I still contact and in touch with went as far as, but even staying in today, as colonels now. But I don't know, I just, again, thought that I'd got what I needed out of it. For various reasons, thought that maybe I could do better. You get annoyed with people and you have this sort of feeling that I want to get out. But up until very late in my career, I never thought about getting out of the military, where the others would threaten it all the time. I never really was perturbed by it. I put up with it and called it my life and dedicated everything to it. But right at the end there, something happened where I just thought, you know what? Maybe there's something bigger and better out there. And at the time, I was volunteering in Kenya to do a small mobilisation contract review type job that should have only been 3 months. The MOD at the time had contracted or were about to contract around $30-odd million worth of work to improve the infrastructure in Kenya. Well, Kenya, I think once they regained their independence from the colonial power in the early 60s, I think.
Which was the UK.
Gosh, yeah. Well, I'm going to say 62, but it could have been a little later than that. Anyway, what the British were pretty clever at doing was maintaining what they would call sovereign land in many areas around the world. Probably not everyone's aware of it, but as a colonial power, we're going to give you your country back. You can manage it on your own now, but what we'll do is we'll keep a little pocket of land, just a little pocket of land that we're going to call British. And we can do whatever we like with that, and that obviously keeps a foothold, a stronghold in your territory. And in Kenya, the sovereignty was in a couple of places, but in particular in Nanyuki, which is a couple of hours north of Nairobi, where the British military would go and do their training, like they do the training in many parts of the world, and not just infantry, but also artillery and engineers and all these guys, and several thousand, tens of several thousand personnel would go on various training exercises in UK and across the globe. And Kenya was a very nice training area because of the climate, because I think it was very cheap, and actually it was very well developed. They had big companies there, Saab and how much I'm allowed to say, but many subcontractors for the military would go out as civilian organisations and prepare this training, which was very well run, very lifelike. And some training areas like Canada would be wholly live firing. So they've got this training area in Kenya, and in order to support the training, they would need permanent staff. So there was a permanent staff establishment in this small town in Kenya, and the military went, well, we're going to be here for the next 10 years. So this crappy little camp that they're on at the moment, it's not really fit for purpose. It's falling down. We're spending a lot of maintenance. So we're going to chuck a load of money at it and improve the infrastructure here in the country. So they basically contracted a Kenyan construction firm to come in on a greenfield site and basically put power, water, sewage treatment, HV power, accommodation buildings, roads, parking areas, workshops. It's huge. It was like a huge camp they were building. So my job as a young soldier, well, not a young soldier anymore, I'm probably in my mid-30s, I'd gone over there to sort of try and set this Kenyan contractor up in starting works on this construction project for the military. Around about the same time that I was thinking about getting out, so I contacted the guy and said, look, I'll come and run this project for you. Are you interested? So I spent 5 years there, and what was $30 million ended up being around $50, $60 million through variation orders, and the contract was poorly written, and although I was on the writing side, I ended up being on this is not a very good contract, maybe we can exploit this somehow. And fell out with a few of my old army pals and a few military pals because, I was then sort of gamekeeper turned poacher. So that was a very interesting time. We had 1,000 guys on site at some point. We had a great deal of work to do. It was a very challenging job, actually, as a construction manager, as a project director, whatever you want to call it. But we were dealing with all the British standards, all the building regulations, and trying to deliver that in a third world country, essentially, which was almost impossible. The material that you would find on the local market would not meet specification, yet the military wanted certain. I'm telling you, it was a nightmare. It was a real problem. So the project extended from 2 years to 3 years to 4 years, and all this stuff getting added in, and it grew arms and legs. So I learned like a lot from that job. And having left the military, being focused on individual specific projects, and never really been on a project in the military from start to finish because, and maybe we'll come back to this later, but the way that the clerk of works, they would do 3 months or 4 months or 6 month tours. And then there was projects, in the future or even in the past that you were snagging. So there was maybe 8 projects that you're working on as a clerk of works, but none of them would be from concept completion. So being on that project in Kenya was a really good insight into every single element of a project from start to finish, with all the problems that go with a big construction project, with all the delays, big client issues, statutory issues, material issues, procurement issues, cash flow issue, everything. So I've talked about it a lot because it was like a big part of where my career went from then, because actually there was nothing that I wasn't aware of. You were dealing with people that wouldn't turn up for work, you were dealing with cheating, you were dealing with theft, you were dealing with all of those soft
Doesn't
skills.
sound like freight forwarding.
Yeah, not really. I mean, yeah. So look, if you've been on a project like that, and I was really at the forefront then of all of the variation orders, all of the pricing of those, all of the contract negotiations with those to get them over the line to start the implementation and then the procurement all the way to the end. So it was a really interesting job. So I was in Kenya and I'd had enough. The project hadn't finished quite yet, but I was really falling out with the client. As I said, I kind of screwed them over a little bit, and they were starting to fight back a great deal to a point where, you know, it's time to skip ship. And my boss at the time, and I'll give Kishore a shout out. He will never listen to this, but if he ever does, what a legend of a man. I really thought a lot about him. He was my managing director. He was the owner of a company, and really looked after me and saw a lot of my worth and vice versa, and never really threw me under the bus, although I was having a lot of crap from the client at the time. He was like, okay, you don't need to go to site, but you need to run this in the background. And we worked together on it so well, to a point where I was like, look, Dubai is calling me. I really want to get to the Middle East. And this was what, 2017, 2018. And I fancied a piece of that pie, you know. Put myself on the market, got my CV out there, and lo and behold, Mammoet calls me for an interview. So it was a job I'd not applied for. I'd never heard of Mammoet, never heard of this industry, actually. I'd been in construction all my life. And
no experience
in heavy lift, never touched transport, never been. I didn't even know what a freight forwarder was, sort of back in 2017. I'd never even heard of a crawler crane. I'd never seen one. Never dealt with them. Yes, we had cranes on site, of course, but there was never anything bigger than a 250 ton or less. So this was not an industry I knew about, abnormal stuff. I was portal frames, steelwork, concrete floors and tiling. That was my job, you know, maybe a bit of HV power thrown in for good measure, but abnormal stuff was never my niche at all. And so I went on an interview. It was an online interview. Yeah, and 3 months later, I'm now in Dubai. I'm starting as a project manager for Mammoet. And
working for who?
Martijn Kuipers was the MD, and our good friend Alan Folds at the time was the operations manager, and in fact it was him that had employed me, so I was working for Alan, actually.
Oh, didn't realise that.
So he had another guy working for him called Bas van der Sande. Big shout out to Bas. Just such a legend, great guy. Still in Mammoet, at headquarters now in the Netherlands, and we work very closely together. I'm actually older than both, probably got a lot more construction and contractual experience than them both. But what a great opportunity to come and work in Dubai. That's all I was after, really. And the truth be told, I was going to use the Mammoet opportunity as a springboard into something else, actually. I thought, once I get here, it's easier to find other work, right? So maybe I'll see how it goes for a couple of months and maybe try something else and get back into the construction industry. But before I'd even unpacked my suitcases, I was already on a plane across to Saudi Arabia, and there was a project not far from Al Jubail, Fadili project, which is a greenfield Aramco oil refinery project that they wanted me to go and run as a PM. So now I'm in Saudi. Within a month of arriving in Dubai, I'm now, you know, I think now we're sort of early June, I reckon it was. So we're in 42, 43 degrees already on site. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm walking around in my red coveralls.
English people don't do well in the heat.
Didn't have a freaking clue what was going on, mate. Didn't have a clue what was going on. All this equipment everywhere. I'd never seen a site as big as that Fadili site. It was unknown to me. There was 30,000 workers on that site at one point. It was enormous. And the amount of steel work and the amount of organisational planning that goes into a project like that, I'd never seen that before. It was on a scale bigger than most people, I think, have seen, actually. What an insight it was, actually. And I was put into a project management role with a very good technical team on the ground. There was some engineers there and a couple of supervisors who knew the equipment. So I wasn't there to assist them in any technical way, but contractually and commercially, they needed some support to get it over the line with, at that time, was Técnicas Reunidas TR. So yeah, I was very fortunate. A bit of personality and a bit of a new face, I think, on the block. They were quite open to entertain me, and yeah, I think proved my worth a little bit in the first couple of months. Maybe we turned it around commercially and made a bit of cash and got some variation orders in and the like. And again, it's about timing and being in the right place at the right time.
And you ended up running Saudi Arabia for
That's
a moment.
right. Yeah. Very quickly. I think I'd only been in Mammoet maybe 3 months. And again, I think I'd met Martijn once in the office and maybe had a couple of emails back and forth with him. I don't know. I was just doing as I was told and trying to do the best job, right? And it caught his attention, perhaps. And they're like, do you fancy taking on the general manager job in Saudi? I thought, bloody right I do. Never seen a P&L in my life. I'd never done sales in my life. Business development, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't. So very quickly you're learning, okay, what's a P&L? Okay, how does that work? Okay.
And you learnt it all on the job?
You learn it all on the job, yeah. And I'm not going to say I was under immense pressure, because if somebody puts you in a role and knows you don't really know it, there can't be that much pressure on you, right? But there was a lot of support from our management. I'm really impressed with how they are really happy and thankful for their support during those couple of months. They realised that it was a go, no-go for Saudi. Do we stay? Do we want to be there? Is it the right place to develop our company? Kev, you tell us. You have a look. Do your best. We're with you. What do you need? And yeah, I welcomed it with open arms, Luke. Of course you do.
What year was this?
This was probably now at the end of 2018, coming into 2019, I think. I joined Mammoet in early 2018, so it's probably, the end of 2018, I think, early 2019, around that time, yeah. So I had a lot of support from the Mammoet management and all the middle managers, and I actually spent a lot of time going backwards and forwards at that time from Saudi to Dubai a lot, calling upon the really unique expertise that these guys have got here. Very good guys, very smart individuals, and was taught a great deal by them. Yeah, it was tough. Saudi's a tough market, and at the time there wasn't a great deal of work. There was some, but not a lot.
Very different to now then.
Yeah, so exactly. I mean, look at it now. I was talking to the general manager who took over me, that was my sales guy, or the branch's head of sales, Abdul Rauf. I won't ever take credit for what it's doing now, but I was there when we had to build that foundation, and we had to build a team, and we had to fight for our commercial position. And I think the Red Sea development project helped. I told you the other day, we got in there early. We got across early. The presentations were given early before all the others sort of got a sniff of it. And we got that foothold. And Mammoet Saudi certainly benefited from that project, albeit about 1 year only, I think the project was, or just over a year. But decent project, and kind of coincided with the whole Mammoet remodelling, this Mammoet international projects, or whatever they're calling it now. I think they call it MIP, where Middle East Africa sort of merged and joined with APAC, as well as revisiting their whole sort of model on day market and low-level works into some kind of niche market of, we're only really going to be involved with stuff above 400 ton, right? And the real niche stuff. And I think that has really worked for them a great deal. And right at the time where Saudi is exploding with work, and what a great job those guys have done to exploit that. Not exploit it, capitalise on it. So yeah, I did 4 years in Saudi, mate, and
good stint.
They took a pound of flesh, to be honest. Not my mutt, but the business there is, I don't think everybody really understands that.
Tough environment.
It is, mate, yeah, especially for an expat, especially for a European. I mean, I don't mean to take anything away from those Indian guys and the Pakistani guys and the Filipinos that are there, and they're all very talented, very clever guys. But, a lot of them are already Muslim, right? So from a very, let's call it, conservative country.
It's an easier transition for them.
It's easier, yeah. I mean, it's also restrictive for them, and they're away from their homes, and they're away from their comforts as well. I appreciate that, but not as much as it is for a European guy. I think it was harder for me than it was for them.
So you were looking for somewhere where you could find a beer more easily?
Yeah, so the boss at the time was pretty happy with me to stay in Bahrain, which was sort of a 90-minute drive, so I think worked, and I did live in Saudi for a bit, and sort of, if you got late meetings and you have to ship around and be here and there and everywhere, and getting home to Bahrain was too much of a travel, then I would stay there. But it was good to have that respite, mate, yeah, for sure. And I had my motorbike on that side, and I was part of a go-karting club, and I was part of a number of clubs actually, mainly drinking. So sorry about that. But then, yeah, that was my respite. And I think in order to take that pound of flesh in Saudi, you have to have that work-life balance. And I think at a certain point, even the drive of 90 minutes becomes a bit too challenging, especially in the weather. And especially if you're there till 7, 8 o'clock at night, or you're travelling to Riyadh, or you're over in Jeddah and over in Red Sea Development, and we were doing a lot of travelling. So getting home, 4 years was enough.
Yeah.
So I'd said to the boss, look, is there any chance of shifting me on somewhere else? Because I feel like I've done what I needed to do. I'd like to pass this candle to somebody else, the baton, pass it on. Somebody else can run with it now. We've done what we needed to do. I'm pretty happy. I can leave here with my head held. I've not, we've certainly not failed. Yes, there were some mistakes, and yes, we lost a bit of money here and there. But all in all, I think the foundation was set, and we built a reasonable team, and it just needed tweaking. From my perspective, the strategic stuff had been set. Now, I'd had enough. So at the time, South Africa was calling.
We're thrilled that the first series of Project Cargo Professionals is exclusively sponsored by Varamar Shipping. Founded in 2009 by shipping serial inventor Alexander Varvarenko, Varamar specializes in bulk, breakbulk, heavy lift, and oversized shipments, and is a trusted carrier to and from Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. At Varamar, massive structures like wind turbines or entire factories are a day-to-day business, and as a semi-liner carrier, they can offer tailor-made solutions, calling wherever and whenever you need them to. With offices in 13 countries, including recent openings in Asia, they're bridging the East-West gap. A multilingual team, fluent in languages from English and German to Arabic and Chinese, means communication is seamless. Visit varamar.com to find out more, and ask them about their new regular service connecting the Middle East, India, Indonesia, and Australia. Visit varamar.com. Now back to the show.
So you moved to an easier market.
Yeah, so they say. But I was super excited about that, by the way. I've met a few guys from the SA team, although I'd never been to Johannesburg or South Africa at all. I'd done some of Africa, of course, my time in Kenya, and travelled a bit of the African continent, and I was just incredibly excited about the opportunity there, and the complete opposite of what Saudi might be, right? I mean, you're jumping from a very, very, very conservative country into a place that, you can smoke weed on the streets kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a very different environment, very different culture, and actually, even the work environment was completely different. I mean, for example, in Saudi Arabia, if you want to hire short-term staff, it's almost impossible. The only people that you can hire there have got visas, right? They're allowed to be there, they're allowed to work there, that are registered in a bank, that have got Saudi IDs and are on some kind of contract already. They're the only people available, whereas in South Africa, you don't need a visa. You can pick up your phone and give anyone a 10-minute job in 5 minutes. Hey, do you want this job? Yeah, I'll be there. So the workforce, it was a very different beast. Moved there, now we're looking at early 22, I think it was.
And your role was what?
Same, GM.
Mm-hmm.
So you have one managing director, or at least we did in the Middle East region, that sits at headquarters here in Dubai as part of Mammoet, and then all of the P&L owners, all of the business owners, the senior guy in that country is called a general manager, a GM. And basically he builds that team. He's building the sales, he's building the opportunities, he's running the operations, he's bringing in the cash, he's dealing with HR, and you're running a small business, but what you're doing once a month and more regularly than that, if you're not doing it very well, is reporting into the headquarters here, where Mammoet then looks at 10 business units. He's got 10 GMs or 6 GMs or whatever that he deals with.
Dubai.
Reporting into Dubai, yeah. And South Africa was the same. So although it was a larger area in terms of geographical space, you've got the whole of Southern Africa. I mean, at the time they were taking projects in Nigeria. Nigeria is quite north on the west there, so they're operating that from Joburg right down in the south. You've got all of the Red Sea, basically, the islands, Mauritius and the Seychelles and Reunion, Madagascar, and then anything up to sort of Ethiopia, Eritrea, and then on the west, sort of Nigeria down, Angola and Namibia.
So there was a lot going on.
Well, yeah, I don't know what you would call a lot going on. I mean, probably not as much going on as we had in Saudi in retrospect. And Saudi has exploded 10 times, 10x since I left. I mean, talking to the guy yesterday, the amount of cranes have got busy, the amount of what they're doing over there is unbelievable. So, South Africa or the Southern African region was, I suppose, in terms of P&L when I moved there, similar. Now very different because Saudi is a very different country. But yeah, reasonable. About the same amount of manpower. We had between 80 and 100 guys, I think. It was bonkers. It really needed a good shake-up, So, that's what I'd come in to do. Have a look at the sales, have a look at the team, have a look at the structure.
So how'd you go from being GM to the chance to buy a bit of Mammoet?
I've been in the chair for like 6 months, and the idea was that they were going to change their model from having a foothold in each country with a general manager and a full team and equipment and yards and maintenance and sales and, a lot of overheads and stress. And I think I mentioned the other day, the idea of that is to then springboard from that smaller maintaining or that self-sufficient business unit. The idea was if you're in the country and you've got a name for yourself and you've managed to do your marketing right, when there are bigger projects, you can springboard from that smaller branch with the big boys that are in the background. Your Dubai headquarter then can jump in with their sales efforts, jump in there with their sort of niche equipment, their SPMTs, their bigger cranes, their bigger, jacking and skidding or whatever it is, the big boy stuff. And these projects are there, and the idea was if you are already in the country and you know these clients and they've worked with you on a smaller scale, they're much more likely to want to work with you on the bigger stuff, right? And that was the idea. Well, my mutt sort of turned that on the head and went, yeah, but that's too risky, that's kind of too expensive, and actually some of these business units, they're not making us any money, but they're continually asking for investment. That crane is old now, we want a new crane, or our vehicles are needing to be replaced, or our building that we're in now needs refurbishing, or whatever it might be. But there's always continuous investment in that smaller business unit. And if these big projects are not being springboarded from, then that P&L is not really supporting the model anymore. Why are we doing it this way? Surely there's a better way of doing it. So we want you to sell it, get it off our books, and we're going to re-strategize into this much bigger sort of niche model of working on the bigger, sexier stuff where we can get our big equipment in there without the overheads and the risk of the dramas that you're causing us at these lower levels.
So that process started when?
22. Yeah, right at the end of 22. So I got there in the February, and by the September, October, I'm like already being asked to find a buyer for the business. And we need to get this over the line, Kev. So yeah, it was a testing time actually, but given the assurance from Mammoet at the time that, this is for the good and benefit of the company overall. We like you and you don't need to worry about it. We'd like you to select some of your good guys that you've got and we'll help them out. But ultimately, we need to let this business go to a strong partner in the country. So yeah, race on 6 to 8 months. The buyer that we did find fell through, and it opened up an opportunity for me and the management team at the time. So after a couple of whiskies one night,
You had a good idea.
we thought, let's see if the bank will loan us some money and we'll do it on our own. So from this, idiot 17-year-old who didn't have a clue what he was doing has now got an opportunity to borrow a large amount of money from the bank. I just didn't believe it would happen. This happens to the few and far between, but what an opportunity to land on my desk. I mean, to be honest, pretty good at what I do. Not singing my own trumpet or anything, but I felt like I was ready to have my own company now. I felt like I was good at it. And
So you hadn't considered that
but I'd
before,
not considered it because,
when they first were looking for a buyer?
in fact, I remember who is now a shareholder, the operations manager at the time, who's now the operations director, Yaku, called me and said, well, why don't we just buy it ourselves? Why are we looking for a buyer? I was like, they won't sell it to us. We'll never find the money. How are we going to find... Shut up, mate. We'll find a buyer. Don't worry. I've got you a job. We'll work together in the future. Let's just do what the big brother says and all will be fine, Never believe in... Well, just didn't even cross my mind, really. So when I first spoke to the higher echelons, and I won't say any names, but one of the individuals that helped us through that process, I hope we'll be lifelong friends, because he really was that favourable uncle, the one that was sort of, okay, I'll take you under my wing.
So after he stopped laughing, he
yeah, right, mate. No. Tell me another one. Go on. But after the second and the third meeting with him, he was like, okay, you guys are serious. Really? All right. Well, if you put something in writing, let's see what we can do. And no, he was a legend and really helped us through that process. And even now, he's so helpful. So at least when you go to the bank for money, they can see this, okay, it's de-risked somewhat with the value of your assets versus the value of this. So, yeah, we're happy to lend you this cash based on...
You were able to put a deal together.
Able to put a deal together. So this was September 22, and by July, August of 23, essentially now we're in charge. The deal is almost done.
So just summarise exactly what you were buying.
Well, because
it wasn't just South Africa.
Well, it's the Southern Africa branch of Mammoet. As I said, it covered not a massive region, but those Southern African countries, of which there's not that much work for us really anyway. Tanzania, yes. Angola, for sure. Madagascar, a little. Wind farms and the like are starting to come up in Namibia and Botswana, and there are the odd sort of bits of transportation work that we can get across there, but it really wasn't a focus to be outside of South Africa that much. It's risky, man. Once you cross the borders of South Africa into other countries, you're acknowledging risk, you're accepting risk, and every risk that you take with shipping and customs and working for a client that perhaps you don't know that well, sending equipment that's worth millions of dollars across the border that you might never get back. It's a risk, man. So there was work across the border, but it included a number of countries there that we are still working in.
What did the deal include?
Everything. Everything. It was literally, you can take the shareholder certificates, you take the manpower, you take all the equipment, you take all the land, you take all the projects, you take all the clients, you take all the liabilities, and that's the big thing. When you buy a going concern, you're buying all of that legacy, meaning anybody that calls Mammoet South Africa up, oh yeah, remember 10 years ago, you guys, you did this job for me, well, this has happened. You've taken over everything. You just changed the name, literally changed the name from Mammoet to Tembo. And Tembo is a Swahili word for elephant.
I was just about to ask, where did the name come from?
Yeah, I would love to lie to you and tell you that was my brainchild. It wasn't. It came from the process of buying it, actually.
How's it all been going?
Whew, that's a really good question. I'd love to sit here and say, yeah, we're millionaires, we've nailed it, we've smashed it out the park. But there's still a long way to go, I think. Challenging. You think you know everything. You think when you're part of a big corporate beast, you think you know everything. But when you're actually in charge and the buck stops at you, it's a very different feeling. It's a very different mindset, actually. So we went through some school fees last year, let's say. We had a few challenges. We took on maybe more than we should have. We probably bit off more than we can chew.
And how is the market in South Africa now?
It's exploding, man. It's absolutely exploding. And what a great time to have bought it. If we were struggling for work and struggling for rates and couldn't keep our equipment busy, but it's going really well in the fact that every single piece of equipment is busy. But I always feel that we have to be kind of self-critical on ourselves. Like, if we just say, oh, it's going really well and we're making loads of money, then that I think that's foolish. I think you got to keep challenging yourself and keep analysing your performance all the time. And we change our strategy a lot. And we love these strategic calls. We love getting our heads together, and it really is the Arthur's round table. There's 5, 6, 7 of us now who get on really well as friends, as trusted colleagues. I think if you've got 6 or 7 very bright minds, you could all pull in different directions. But if you get in the same room within a couple of hours, so we'd go off for weekend retreats, and we'd go and have a few drinks and say, well, here's the agenda, guys. What do you think we need to do here? And at the end of that retreat, right, we know the strategy for the next couple of months. But even then it meanders a little bit. That didn't quite go right. So we're having constant like changes to what we're doing. And I kind of like that, you know. It's good to have an end goal in the next 2 or 3 years, which we've got, but how we get there can change and meander.
And what are the future plans? What's next?
Well, we want to stay in the wind industry for sure. I think there's a great deal of opportunity there for Tembo. There will be some investment in equipment. There's an investment in the team and the division itself. And we're working pretty closely now with those big OEMs and those freight forwarders. I think we've got a good foothold in the wind market. We're not going to get too big. I don't think we need to grow so big. We certainly don't want to be left at the end of the 4 or 5 years with a load of equipment that we can't get rid of. So, you know, we've got to be mindful of this is a short-term curve, as it normally is in Africa. You know, you capitalise on that 3 or 4 years and get out. But yeah, we're still focusing on Mozambique, you know, with the LNG project there. There's certainly going to be some opportunities in the future coming from that. Of course, we've always got, you know, the Sassels and the Natrefs and the energy sector for us, where we can get involved in their shutdowns and turnarounds, and there's quite a lot of work in renewing those old plants as well. There's a load of stuff going on in KZN, some new installations going on down there as well. Angola, Tanzania, there's work out in the ports, and there's plenty of work actually to keep us going for the next couple of years. I really don't feel under pressure commercially anymore. I think a lot of investment is coming into Africa now. Lots in mining, there's lots in renewables, oil and gas. Saudi's the big place now because that's where all the money is. But watch this space, man. We've always said it'll go to Africa, but we can see some fruit in the pudding now, and it's quite sexy actually.
We like to finish with a question from somebody from the industry.
Yeah.
And we've got a question from Liesel, who is actually a journalist in South Africa. Mm-hmm. And here's her question.
Hi, Kevin. Liesel Fenty here, freelance journalist at Breakbulk, Freight News and Lifting Africa. My question is, considering that change in logistics is not easy in Africa, how has the transition from Mammoet to Tembo unfolded operationally? And what has been the response from clients and industry partners as you establish this new entity? Additionally, what are you doing differently?
That's a great question, by the way, because you would think that once you change the name above the door, that everyone would start to panic. It was the opposite. I don't think we've had a single problem with a single client. We just went to them and said, you know me, Kev, and that's Johan, we're staying, but we're now in charge. Remember that crane that we brought to site? It's still there. Remember that project manager? He's still there. Okay, you still got red overalls, but you've just changed. Everything stayed the same. So actually, the clients were easy. Funny enough, it was our own staff that had the biggest problem. How do we know we're going to get paid our salaries at the end of the month?
Fair question.
Where's the corporate backup? Where's the big deep pockets? But we said time and time again at town hall after town hall, nothing changes, guys. We're the same team doing the same thing on the same sites for the same clients with the same equipment with the same policies, with the same bank account that you're getting paid from. Nothing's changed. So this year we're dedicating a lot of time for warm, fuzzy hugs and socialising and getting amongst the guys more than we had done last year, simply because we had such a lot of work to do in the commercial side of it, and integration, implementation, you know, changing over systems and laptops and God knows what. It was a challenge, but this year is going to be focused on manpower and getting them to understand that they're as secure, more secure now probably than they were before, because, you know, we're not going to let our own business go down the tube. We've got proper skin in the game now, so nothing to worry about. But yeah, clients, not a problem. Actually, done nothing different with the clients other than continue the good work that we were doing as Mammoet.
Thanks to Kevin O'Sullivan for being the very first guest on Project Cargo Professionals, powered by Varamar. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Got feedback or a guest suggestion? Reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, let's keep in touch. Follow me, Luke King, on LinkedIn, and check out our website, projectcargopros.com.